All right, it is 6 p.m. on Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. We will call to order the Planning Commission meeting. These meetings will be recorded and published to www.youtube.com/c/City of Oak Harbor. The City of Oak Harbor is committed to providing meeting access to the widest possible audience, regardless of technology or ability. If accommodations are required, please call 360-279-4500 at least 2 business days prior to the meeting. At this time, we will take roll, and I understand that we have one commissioner who is asked to be absent. Can we take roll on everyone else? Everyone else we have present. Okay, so all commissioners except for one is present, and I do not see our council member. Is our council member online? Okay, so our council member will not be with us this evening. All right, so first item is the approval of minutes. Now, in this meeting, we need to approve 2. We did not have a quorum sufficient for last one. So our first one that we need to approve are the March 26th regular business meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion in a second for that.
I move to approve the March 26, 2024 meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes. The next one we have is our April 23rd, 2024 regular business meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. We will move on to the public comment. During this time, citizens may comment on subjects of interest not on the agenda or agenda items. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes to ensure maximum participation during the 15-minute time frame allotted for this item. Public comments may also be submitted at www.oakharbor.gov/public comment at least 2 business days in advance of the advisory board meeting. And I do not see anyone in the audience, but we do have some comments that were sent in via email, so we will show those at this time. And commissioners, you do have a packet in front of you with those comments. All right, seeing no one in the audience, we will close the public comment period, and we will move on to the public hearing. During scheduled public hearings, interested parties will be given the opportunity to provide testimony or other comments as applicable. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. And we do not have anything on the public hearing today, so we will close the public hearing and we will move on to the discussion phase. The first item up for discussion today is the Central Development Area, or CDA. This is an update that will be presented by our Development Services Director, David Kuhl, and our Public Works Director, Steve Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Tonight, as you know, Steve Schuler is here next to me, Public Works Director. He'll be taking on the second half of our presentation, and I will take the first. We're going to talk a little bit about the Central Development Area, also known as the CDA. It will be put into our 2025 Comprehensive Plan Update. And as you know, the 25 Comp Plan Update has been started. We're currently doing our buildable lands analysis as part of that, and you'll start to see some of that activity this summer. We don't anticipate starting any activity on the CDA until this fall. The Central Development Area, there will be potential upzones going along with the buildable lands analysis that's coming up, and that's being done by Kimley Horn. With this land analysis, we'll be able to see where additional density can be accommodated. So part of the game plan behind the Central Development Area is to put more density within some of the older parts of town, areas where there could be some vacant lots or some other lots that are redevelopable. And the game plan is, since that's older part of town, the infrastructure is older, and it's more primed to be redeveloped, and reinvestment can help us go a long ways. And Mr. Schuler was always a strong advocate of trying to get that infrastructure rebuilt. The comp plan will change land uses, and then after that, the CDA will guide various zoning changes. The comprehensive plan and the housing units. So the Department of Commerce is requiring us to include a housing component to our comprehensive plan that for the first time requires an affordable housing component. Normally, as you know, we go through these processes and add more density in our comprehensive plan, but in this case, we're required to add an additional amount of affordable housing. So they have a certain chart out, and I don't have the chart here today. Maybe Mr. Kamak will have that at some point. But for instance, you might have a situation where the median income, let's say it's $50,000 or $75,000 in town, you're required under the state rules and regulations to provide affordable housing in the 0 to 50% of the area median income, as well as the 50 to 60%, the 60 to 80%, the 80 to 100, and the 100 to 120. So those are some affordable housing components that we haven't had before. And you can imagine trying to fit a certain type of house into a plan that only allows a certain number of people to occupy it at certain income levels. So that's the challenge we're faced with our new upcoming comprehensive plan. So the Central Development Area is where we hope to put some of this housing. One other tool we hope to use as part of this project is the multifamily tax exemption program. And we haven't spent much time in front of you talking about it, but the game plan is we have a consultant on board that can help us write rules and regulations that will establish a multifamily tax exemption. And in a nutshell, what that does is it allows tax exemptions for investors when they build affordable housing that allows up to 20% of the project to be rented to affordable housing candidates. And that's an investment for us because we'll get more affordable housing. Business owners will be able to have people who work for them living in an affordable house. On the other hand, investors capture some benefit from that. And we capture the benefit in the Central Development Area of more investment in our infrastructure. So that is the game plan of using multifamily tax exemptions within the Central Development Area. We currently have a contract with the vendor, and that expires in October. So we hope to get them engaged again, and we can bring more information back to you on that. So that's the multifamily tax exemption that will be part of the CDA. So the schedule we have on the Central Development Area is the 25 comp plan that you'll learn about next. Will be through the spring and the summer. We're starting the buildable lands and then of this year, and then the integrated planning workshops for the Central Development Area won't start until this fall. But that's just around the corner. We're at June, and so we're looking forward to getting something done. This is your map. This shows the central development area. Everything in green is mainly residential, except for the area right along Highway 20 that bisects the map. As you can see, we have a fuzzy map where we've established a few areas to the west side of Highway 20. We're kind of moving the map around a little bit, trying to capture certain areas. The purple area you see is our central development area downtown. And one of those projects within that area is something advocated by Main Street, and that's to go from the City Beach Street area where it intersects with Pioneer and go west to Highway 20, change that zoning from C3 zoning to Central Business District. So the idea is to extend the CBD all the way from where you see the red dot in the middle of the screen all the way to Highway 20. And that way we're going to incorporate the same types of zoning, same types of height requirements. Other aspects of this map are the yellow area you see in the middle of the screen. That is an area where Whidbey Avenue intersects with Midway. And that area is an older part of town that used to be a main drag through town. And we see a lot of redevelopment potential there. We see a lot of possibilities in the comp plan as well as the central development area for some mixed-use housing, possibly some taller buildings. And it will probably circulate around being able to find some vacant lots that we can develop to scale. There's also an area in there that's known as the school bus barn site. And you might not have been around, but the school district came in and met with the city council at one time and asked them if they would be interested in transferring the bus barn, which is that area right there next to Midway, out to the Public Works facility. And that's a facility where we already have fuel and storage, and it would be a centralized place where they could work on buses. Part of that trade would be the advocacy to be able to redevelop some of that property. And so we see that whole area, it's called Chimes Corner, but that's because one of the buildings is called Chimes Corner. But it could be named anything, and that's really more of a midtown type of redevelopment. So you can see a number of different areas on this map, could be different densities at some point. The area down in the lower right-hand corner is blue, and that's our marina, and that's just there for your reference. So, last slide I have before Steve takes over. We want to let you know a little bit about the marina. The marina was part of our budgeting process the last few years to be able to tie that to downtown. We had wanted to try and create some investment for the benefit of the marina. And the marina is still moving forward, but we think that would be in a future phase, phase 2. The marina has a number of things they need to do, a number of things like dredging and creating a new breakwater, improving a lot of different avenues to get in and out of the bay. So we think that that's probably part of a bigger picture. The marina will take care of themselves along with the community. The other aspect to this was we were trying to tie the downtown to the marina through a boardwalk or some other means from downtown over to the marina. We think that that might be part of a bigger conversation that would happen as part of the marina redevelopment, and particularly in the central development area. And so that's coming up next. We'll try and find solutions to the various things that we've seen. Ways to tie the marina to the downtown has been on people's radar for a long time. And so that would be a place where you could jump in there and advocate for what solutions you see. Well, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Cool, and good evening, commissioners, and thank you for your service to your community tonight. A little too close. Mr. Cool. Oh, great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, good. So that was good background that Mr. Cool provided. And so what we have done, and I'll go through this and tie these two things together, is the city purchased 2 properties down on Pioneer and Midway. And those properties are contaminated with gas station and dry cleaning chemicals and possibly some PFAS. And so we've been pursuing some grant funding to do what's called a brownfield development, and I'll kind of explain what that means if you're not familiar with that terminology as we move forward. But since January, we got a $200,000 grant through the Department of Ecology and another $100,000 grant really through the federal EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And so those 3 agreements that are part of those grant programs allow us to go out and do some environmental remedial investigation. And the council has approved a contract with Fowler & Consulting to do that work, and I'll show a little bit more about that. It allows us to do integrated planning, both for that property and for the central development area. And so we have $68,000 to do renderings of both our site and the downtown and this larger CDA area. And then lastly, CClear, the Center for Creative Land Recycling, is funded through the EPA, and they're going to allow us to do market studies, economic analysis, and do public workshops that Mr. Cool referenced, but that's not going to happen until sometime this fall at the earliest. And so what does that look like? In January of this year, we got a $200,000 ecology grant with no funding requirement, 100% grant funded. We were able to get a $100,000 USPA grant really through this nonprofit CClear. And so how does the breakdown of those costs look like? There's really 5 areas that are going to be funded. I went through the first 3, but it also applies. Number 4, it allows $20,000 to be used for staff time. So I'm already dedicating my staff time to this to be reimbursed. And also, there's 2 existing buildings down there, the old gas station building and the old tattoo building, we call it. I think that some people might have a different name for it. But we were able to go in and determine that there is asbestos in both those buildings, and we used the grant funding for that. The Center for Creative Land Recycling does require a 10% match, so there is a city share of $10,000 out of this whole package. All right, so here's the 2 parcels that the city purchased about 1.5 years ago. It's about 1.1 acres. And again, it's right on Pioneer, Bayshore, and Midway, right on the waterfront. For the first part, the environmental remediation, what we'll be doing is installing 5 monitoring wells, and then we'll be conducting several rounds of quarterly sampling. The contamination appears not to be a lot in the actual soils themselves, but there is contamination. When we did our property purchase, we did some due diligence. It appears to be in the groundwater. So by going through a couple of rounds of sampling, we'll get a better understanding of how the tides and where these different contaminants may be coming from. And so you can see that in purple are the 2 existing buildings, the gas station building on the left and the tattoo building on the right. Then the integrated planning is really going to focus on 3 areas. First, it's going to focus on this 1.1 acres, and we're going to show renderings. Right now, the existing zoning allows 5-story buildings, 55 feet there. So we're going to show what that would look like so people can really envision what that tattoo building would look like if it wasn't there, and instead there was a 5-story mixed-use building there. We also want to focus on parking requirements. A lot of reasons these areas have not redeveloped is 1, because of the contamination, but 2, our code requires a very intensive, what I'm going to call a 1960s suburban parking standard. So if you did buy that property and you went to redevelop it, our land values don't support, for the most part, structured parking, which can run $50,000 to $100,000 per stall nowadays to build structured, indoor parking. And so you'd build surface parking lot, and that would cover about 80% of your site. Plus, you'd have to meet all of the new stormwater rules when you built that surface parking, because that's all considered pollution generating, and that is intensive cost nowadays. So it just doesn't make economic sense to go build 80% of surface parking for most folks, and that's why you're not seeing a lot of redevelopment in these areas. We also want to take a look, lastly, is right now the code focuses everything on Pioneer, because that was the classic retail area, but we've got this beautiful waterfront. And so we want to take a look at what it would be to require both retail and public use on the waterfront side. Just like right now in Mukilteo, they had down on the water there, they've got some renderings. They're going through that process right now. And of course, all of that used to turn up the hill because it was all industrial down there at Mukilteo. Well, all those tank farms have been removed. And so now they've got a plan right there by the new ferry dock to put in retail and mixed use all in that area and turn it toward the water. So we want to do that same analysis as part of these rendering works. And we'll be working very closely with our planning staff and with the Planning Commission, the council, and the community as we take a look at these items. So second, we're going to look at the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is the downtown waterfront, and Mr. Cool showed you that in the map. That's about 80 acres. Again, we want to look at other city-owned properties as catalysts. We have a police station property. We have the city hall site. We have a property that we removed the old house down below. We own the other property down here that's a parking lot. We want to look at those renderings and do it like the city of Bothell did, where we'll show a bird's eye view of what that whole area would look like if it was redeveloped, and take a look at these different components so that everyone can have a good visualization of how these things would impact a future downtown and this beautiful waterfront that we all get to live next to. And lastly, number 3, we'll look at this redevelopment zone, which is 500 acres approximately. That's ginormous from an urban planning standpoint. And so we're going to focus on this Chimes Corner, and we also want to take a look at maybe the idea of a pedestrian-focused street that would go from our center or the senior center down to the waterfront. It doesn't need to be at that exact location. We want to give that idea of what that could mean from a retail and commercial standpoint, because when you build those sorts of things, what has now been proven over the last 30 years is people can't get enough of it. They come in groves to come and live near those pedestrian-oriented streets. All right, the third element, again, is by the C-Clear Group. And again, they're going to do economic analysis and market feasibility. So this won't just be a plan that's out there that we won't have some good current economic analysis behind. Take a look at really what the market, both now and the projected future, would provide. They're going to conduct 3 public workshops that we want to make sure the planning commissioners are invited to and part of that planning. And again, those aren't going to occur any sooner than the fall, because this work that needs to happen on our comprehensive plan really needs to happen this spring and summer before we get to this. They'll be helping us engage our federal and state agencies as part of this. And again, this is all part of cleaning up not just our city properties, but we're assuming this contamination has spread to other properties, and we want to be able to work the entire surrounding areas. Again, number 4, it provides reimbursement for staff time. And then number 5, we've determined there is asbestos in both those buildings. It will be on the city's cost to remove that asbestos. And then we've asked the council, we'll probably go back to them one more time. We're recommending demolition of those 2 existing buildings just based on their condition. As the city owns them, they continue to be kind of a greater liability. We already had someone break into them. I would not advise breaking into them. 1, it's illegal, and then 2, the bird poop will just knock you out the minute you go inside those buildings. Neither of them have much of a roof anymore, so they smell quite bad. All right, just a little bit of terminology, and again, many of you are probably very familiar with this. A Greensfield site would be, for example, outside our city. If there's a farm or there's a forest and you develop that, that's considered a Greensfield site. You're taking, in essence, a natural environment to do your development. A Gracefield site is something that's previously been developed, but it has a giant parking lot that's hardly ever used, and we've got those around the city too. And if we looked at redeveloping those, we would call that a Grayfield site. Well, the focus of these grants is what's called a Brownsfield site, and those are areas that generally have been abandoned. They have contamination that has halted development due to the uncertainty of what the costs are going to be to take care of those pollutants. And so that's what we're looking at with the city-owned properties. As many of you are aware that have been around the community, redevelopment of downtown has been an item that's been on the community's mind and the business mind for at least 3 decades, right? We've got the Harbor Watch. Many of you have probably read this from the June of 1990. We had another one that was done in the 2000s. We have another one that was done in 2010. There was ones that were done in between these dates. And so, those have been great places to move from, but we're really trying not to make this just another plan. We're really trying to make this something that would create action and would have something that would move us forward. And so we have $300,000 to do that. And so the ingredients for success for something like this is not an easy lift. This is going to be a big lift, and we're going to need help. And so this needs to remain a city policy for years. It needs to be a community-wide vision. Can't just be the current elected or current planning commissioners. It really needs to live beyond that and become part of the community's vision. We need creativity and foresight. We need to be thinking about not what we needed back in the 1990s, but what we're going to need in the year 2030, 2040. What kind of families are we going to have? What kind of community are we going to be in? What is going to be the regional Seattle economic conditions? And then we're going to need collaboration and support for one another. And so again, the council approved last week 3 agreements, and we've already had kickoff meetings with 2 of those. And Mr. Cool and I will have a kickoff meeting with the 3rd one here next week, and we're available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Chazar.
Okay, bear with me, I got lots. So a Phase 1 and Phase 2 was done on the property that the city purchased, correct?
Correct.
So how come we couldn't move just directly to a RFP to remediate the property based on the Phase 1 and Phase 2? How come we need a consultant to help us with that? We had the Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Yes, and so that's a very good question. And so in essence, we could do that on the city's dime, but instead we pursued grants. And so there's a college grant is allow us to move forward with that. So the next recommendation is to put in monitoring wells, since it appears that the contamination is in the groundwater. And so that makes it, let's call it more complicated, because generally, there's, not to get into all the different remediation options, but, pumping that groundwater takes years to try to get out these contaminants at the parts per million, parts per billion, sometimes parts per trillion to pull them out. So there's probably going to be some sort of determination of how much of the contamination is ours and how much of the contamination was from other properties. And just to give you one indication, it appears that there's a dry cleaners further up the hill. That dry cleaners has been closed. We have what appears to be dry cleaning chemicals when we did our due diligence on our property. And so part of this will be to document all that and then to work with the college and the EPA and what the solutions are to that, let's call it neighborhood problem. Did that help answer that question?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, and
So
I can go
let's-
into more detail as you
So
wish.
let's go on to the dry cleaner issue. So I've heard that the dry cleaner chemicals are in the groundwater. Dry cleaner was a little bit up midway, and so that implies that in order for this site to be developed, that you're going to have to remediate a large section of midway all the way up to where the dry cleaners was to get the parts per million down. You're going to have to remediate the dirt between the dry cleaners and this piece of land. Is that correct? In theory.
So again, you're asking really good questions, and so I'm going to give you my area of expertise. This is not my specific area of expertise. Out of college, I was hired by Chevron Oil Company, but that was in the early 1990s. So all of my knowledge about remediation is very robust, but it's older. And so the regulations have changed a lot. But I would tell you, I wouldn't assume anything, right? We could go ahead and, if there was a developer that wanted to develop this site right now, and we could work with let's call it the bank. Usually the banks are the hardest people, right? If you have to go and borrow money, they're the ones that you have to convince to take the risk on this contaminated property. So it can get very complex, but let's just assume we had a third-party developer that wanted to develop this, and they wanted to enter in an RFP with us, and we wanted to do that. We could move forward with that right now today, based on the information we have right now, and then we would just have to work with Ecology on what that means. And so, for example, when I was at Chevron, we built a brand-new site on a still contaminated property, but we put all the remediation works in the basement, and for 5 years, we continued to do remediation on that property while that building was being lived in and while there was commercial on the bottom floor. So all of that is totally available. What we're trying to do right now is get more information on the type of contamination so that we can make better decisions and include that in a future RFP to a developer.
Okay. Before I get another question, I do agree that those two buildings need to be removed.
Okay.
So I would definitely encourage the city council to move forward with funding to remove those two buildings. They're going to have to be removed no matter what. That's just my own personal opinion as a citizen, as a commissioner, that we really should move forward in removing those two eyesores. They're our property. We need to do it. Okay, let's move on.
No, thank you very much. That is the
So-
feedback that we need to receive. So
No
thank
ifs,
you.
ands, buts about it. 55 feet, is that off of Pioneer or off of Bayview?
As far as how the height is determined,
Yes.
I'll let the plan, I'm sure there's a definition. I've looked it up before. But it's, in short term, it's an averaging.
Okay, because there's a good difference in elevation between Pioneer and Bayview. So the backside
Right.
of the development is going to be significantly lower than the front side. So I'm just curious. So the reason why I asked this, I was approached by a citizen about a year ago about a development they wanted to do on this property, and you brought up parking, and so they were discouraged for two reasons. Number one, they knew it was going to be over $1 million to remediate the property. That's an issue, and obviously we know that land is full of backfill from the bay, so it's going to require pylons, or aggregate pylons, something of some sort to
Yes.
support it. You can't just build straight on top of that dirt. It's not going to work. But the big issue was also about parking. He was discouraged about parking. When I looked at his plans, his parking was up on the same level as Pioneer versus on Bayview. And I asked, why weren't you putting the parking lot underneath this building? And he was told he couldn't put the parking lot under this building because of, grab onto your chair, tsunami regulations, which this commission has now found that there's no such thing as tsunami regulations, but you brought up the parking issue. So I guess as a commissioner of the Planning Commission, I would like to see this project move a little bit faster, okay? I know there are some council folks that'd like to get their money back on this piece of land that we purchased. And so we've owned it for a year and a half now, and now we're hiring a consultant that's gonna monitor water. I'm guessing that's gonna be 4 or 5 months down the road of monitoring water before we can figure out what we wanna do with this land, and then go out for additional grants to have from the federal government, and whether it's Superfund, cleanup site funds, or whatever it is. But I believe its anchor to the downtown is holding up a lot of development to the downtown. And so that's just my personal opinion, also as a commissioner, that this thing needs to move a little bit faster. And I have actually purchased an old oil dump site, okay, in Mississippi, and went through the phase 1 and went through the phase 2 and remediated the property without having to hire consultants and monitor groundwater and stuff like that. I get it, I respect it. It's a totally different era. It was back in the early 2000s, not 1900s, or 1990s, but 1900s, sorry, didn't mean to date you, Steve. But the fact of the matter is that when I saw this on the agenda, I was confused on why we're having to hire a consultant since the phase 1 and phase 2 was already done. So I'll get off my soapbox. And I think people are going to want to know if it's 55 feet off of Pioneer or if it's 55 feet off of Bayview as far as the height requirement of this building, because I'm assuming, just based on my own guess, this most likely will be a mixed-use type of development. So, anyway, thank you.
Mr. Shazar, if I can address some of your concerns. The height of a building would be averaged, and so it's averaged between the difference between Pioneer and Bayshore. And so chances are it could be 55 feet technically off Bayshore, and it would be less than that off Pioneer, but it would be averaged to get a decent height. I've talked to developers, and what they have intended to do, if they do come to town, is integrate the parking on the ground floor and on subsequent floors so that they'll have plenty of parking. Obviously, sometimes developers tell you that they want to eliminate parking, but they really don't. They really need parking. And so this particular developer I talked to said he'd be interested in doing that, using the height requirements we have. So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Frey.
Hey, thanks for your time. I guess I just have more of an educational question. is if it's already been approved by the city council, why are we discussing this tonight? And I'm just trying to get educated, so forgive me for not knowing.
Of course, what's been approved so far is contracts to work with private contractors to help us analyze the groundwater contamination, and contractors to help us with design and imaging of what buildings could look like. And the third contractor is one that'll do a feasibility analysis, an economic analysis for us for the entire downtown to help us determine what the rents currently are and what the new buildings could rent for. So those are three separate contracts that Steve just went with council just the other night. So that's where we are right now. We haven't gotten any land use clearances. The city council hasn't approved anything else but those contracts.
And you're right, you're getting in, let's call it early on the process. And so in my mind, we're not just going to, do these renderings. There's going to be some, code changes that need to happen. They may be small, but they may make a real big impact. And so those will come before the Planning Commission as part of this process, and you'll look at those code changes. But any of those would happen at the end of this process based on the committee input and other input based on these renderings and these public workshops.
Okay, but wouldn't you want to have an answer before then from the public before you start this process? Otherwise, how do you know how to move forward without having the approval first? Otherwise, we're doing the approval and then coming back and asking the public for their input. Is that correct? Is that the way I understood you?
Well, right now, we're just approving the contracts, right? So no work has begun. And so part of the information we want to give to the community so that they can make good informed decisions, as well as you and as well as the city council, is this economic analysis, these market rate studies, and these renderings that help people not just see words, but actually see what the buildings would look like, right? Understand the scale, understand how parking requirements impact what can be developed, and other things that we'll get into it as we get through this process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cool and Mr. Schuler, for your presentation this evening. We will move on to item B, which is the 2025 major update to the comprehensive plan, and that will be presented this evening by our principal planner, Mr. Kak Kamak.
Mac, Principal Planner, here to give a short presentation just to give you an update on where we are with the 2025 update to the comprehensive plan. The last time I chatted with the Planning Commission about the comprehensive plan was in March, and so I thought it would be good to just give you an update. And I think I mentioned at the last meeting, I have comprehensive plan on almost every agenda for the rest of the year. And so I will be coming to you in some form or the other, trying to provide you with information as we go through this process. So I have a couple slides just as talking points to give the update. So since I chatted with the Planning Commission in April, we hired Kimberly Horn to be our consultant to help us through this update process. They are currently working with us, creating a project charter in which they kind of describe what they're going to do in the process and what roles are, who plays what roles, and how do we get to the end of this plan. We're currently working on all these documents. They're just in draft form. We're also working on a community engagement plan, how to engage the community, what all tools we use. And so that's pretty exciting. Again, that's in a draft form, and we're working with it. We just had a meeting with the consultant a couple hours ago, still talking about these documents. So this is it's an ongoing process. We also have a draft schedule. I have a snippet of it in the next slide. We'll take a quick look at it. As we're working through this, I'm not sure if the Planning Commission was aware or not. We had a joint meeting with the City Council about the comprehensive plan because we knew that the last time we did an update, we were with different viewpoints with the Island County in terms of growth and growth-related issues, which didn't work out really well for both communities as a county and for the city. And so this joint meeting helped to kind of chat about some of the history that is behind this process and how do we not repeat some of the mistakes that we did earlier and how we do a more collaborative process this time around. So it was a good meeting, it was very productive, and so just wanted to let you know that we are starting that process with the county because we're all updating our comprehensive plan. We all have the same schedule, and so we can look at some of these issues that the state, as David mentioned, we're looking at all the housing, and of course, Oak Harbor is taking a lot of the housing as part of this update, and so we'll have a lot of work to do in that process. So the joint meeting was good. They wanted to have follow-up meetings, and so as we go through and do our analysis on the land capacity analysis, the buildable lands analysis, and determine if we need to grow, we'll have more discussions with the county. So a lot more work coming our way. Don't expect you to read this, but I just kind of wanted to give you this. Once it's finalized, I will share all of these documents. Probably at the next Planning Commission meeting, you'll get finalized versions of some of these documents. We are currently working on this. So currently our schedule is to be done by June of 2025. And that was the original schedule, that was the original deadline given by the state. Since then, they have passed legislature to move that deadline to December 2025. However, we are still planning to do the June 2025. I'm not 100% sure that we'll complete it, and I'll tell you why right now, because we may have our documents and things all set. However, the county is also updating their plan, and their schedule, they're going to take all the way till December to update their plan. Ideally, it would be nice for all jurisdictions in Island County to kind of adopt these plans at the same time, because we have information that we would have shared, we have maps that are consistent with all our documents, and so hopefully all of that will be consistent. So I'm thinking even when we get to June 2025, we may have a lot of our information up to date, but there may be still some things that we're working with the county because they are yet to update the plan. And so there may be some give and take there. But currently we'll work with that schedule of June 2025. That way we can get our things lined up and we can get our work done. And then at the end, if we do have to get an extension, we can work with the county on that. So just wanted to kind of share with you the schedule. I did mention in the report that we will be having a sort of a steering committee. We usually do for most of our planning process. And I was going to ask the Planning Commission to select a representative to be on this committee. And I'm still going to ask you to do that, but I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit. We had a couple meetings, just a couple hours ago, we had a meeting with the consultant. And like I said, some of these are still under discussion. We're talking about how to engage the community throughout this process and how to engage the community at large. There's two thoughts about forming committees and having kind of meetings with the community, like town meetings, to get their input. There's slight differences in these. You know, when you open up a meeting to the community, you're getting the community input at large. You don't know who's coming to the meeting, and you may get various input. With the committee, you have usually some representatives from agencies, and sometimes your input is just limited because of the representation that's in there, and it's not the wider community. So there's pros and cons to both these approaches, and we're trying to figure out if we can actually combine the two so that we can get sort of a committee representation, various agency input, but how can we also at the same time get community input? So we're kind of working on some creative community input strategies, which may veer away from the traditional committee, 10 people in a room discussing the entire comp plan. We want to kind of keep it still open and more public in a sort of sense. We will still have issues that I think a smaller group of people will have to sit around the table and kind of hash out. But for the most part, we want to try and keep our comp plan because it's very general and it approaches a lot of the topics of interest. We want to kind of keep our public input and comments to the larger public if we can. So with that, it's still in progress. We'll probably have a hybrid approach. So what I'm going to ask the Planning Commission tonight is there's potential for either a steering committee or potentially a couple focus groups where we may need Planning Commission members to participate to represent the commission. So I'm going to ask the commission if you can choose one or two representatives that are interested, and we can kind of reach out to you as we develop the process to see what your interest is and what group you would like, what issues you'd like to be interested in discussing. So that's one thing I'm going to ask the Planning Commission. I'm also going to share that we are going to work with the Planning Commission a lot through this comprehensive plan. I mean, if we deviate from this committee type approach, what we're thinking is a better approach is to come to the Planning Commission, because this is a public forum. We have public comments. People can come here and chat. So when we have land capacity analysis and when we have the buildable lands analysis and we're looking at land use, changing zoning, this is all Planning Commission's realm. I mean, the Planning Commission is primarily a land use recommending body. So anything to do with land use and zoning goes through the Planning Commission. That's why Planning Commission doesn't get to see the other budgetary stuff that the city does. They have separate commissions for that. The Planning Commission is tasked mainly with land use and zoning. And that's why we come with, development related, policy related to land use. So this is a great forum for the public to get engaged in. So instead of having like a committee format, we may come to the Planning Commission and talk a lot about the land capacity analysis, buildable lands analysis here, and you'll get the documentation. And with that, since you get the documentation, it's also available to the public then. If you do the committee, then the committee people get it, and the documentation gets to the public a little later, So there's pros and cons to this. Like I said, we're still discussing this, but I know for sure that the Planning Commission is going to be heavily involved in a lot of the comprehensive plan work. So you guys will have the front row seats to a lot of the discussions, and we'll be encouraging the public mainly to come to the Planning Commission to give their input, and we'll kind of channel the comprehensive plan process mainly with your input and your ability to hold public meetings and discuss these things publicly. So you'll have a large role in it, and so even though you may not be in a committee or a focus group, you'll still get all the information and you'll be part of it. So we're happy to discuss that with the consultant and make sure that the Planning Commission has a good role in it. So having said that, we would like the commission to deliberate and suggest a couple members that we can kind of reach out to see if you want to be involved as we go through the process, just gauging interest levels here. Like I said, I don't know how many meetings it would be. It would be dependent on the issues that we have at hand. And like I said, when I come to the next meeting, I'll probably have a better maybe a finalized version of the schedule, maybe a better version of the community engagement program, and walk you through that process a little more. But your next meeting is a month away, and we may need some meetings in between to start the process because we don't have time, and I'd like to reach out to Planning Commission members and be able to get your input if necessary. So if you can suggest a couple contact people for me, I would appreciate it. That would be a great help. So with that, I'll answer any questions or comments that you have.
Well, thank you, Kak. Real quick, though, before we go forward, do you need those names tonight, or can we give the commissioners a day or two to kind of go over their schedule and see what time commitment they have, and maybe provide those to you by close of business Thursday or open business Friday?
Either way is fine. If you discuss it here, you'll all know who's interested. If you do through email, it's challenging to communicate whether you're the person that's involved in the committee or somebody else has reached out. You want to know for yourselves, who the representative is.
So I apologize. I mean, have the conversation as you've made the request here, but give those commissioners a day or two to confirm back to you that
Absolutely.
yes, they can do that. They can
Yes,
meet the
yes.
commitment.
Absolutely, please,
Okay.
yes, that's, yeah. Just interested people, if you can get back and say, okay, I may not be able to just because of the timeline or whatever, that's fine as well. So, yes, no problem.
Thank you, CAC. Before we move on to questions, do we have any commissioners that are interested or may be interested in being on these steering committees? Commissioner Engelbrecht? Anyone else? Okay. I know you need a couple, so let me check what time commitment I have, and I will help in any way I can. Okay.
Sounds
Any questions for CAC this evening? Yes, Commissioner.
So, I guess in general, are you anticipating that meetings and focus group stuff is happening after work hours, or sort of during the day is your, like ideally?
Good question. I would think that most of our community engagement, like let's say open houses or even steering committees, would probably be after work. There are larger groups, probably some citizen involvement too if we can, and open to the public, so we'll probably have some of those in the evening. The focus group ones may be more related to agencies or people in the technical field, and so we'll probably try and schedule those maybe during the weekdays. But I'm not sure if those focus groups, all the focus groups will require planning commission input, you know, if we're meeting with maybe, it's just topic dependent. So I'm guessing that would be the separation.
I have one more comment more than anything else. So, and it ties to comp plan and to central development agency. I think it would be really useful, and I would advocate to focus displacement policies and that type of housing related advocacy as we move through these processes, right? I think that it's great to think about redevelopment, and especially in older neighborhoods, but always thinking about who gets kicked out of those places. That's something that we should be focusing on, and as we go through these processes, making sure that whatever responsibility the city can have to mitigate that, I think is critically important.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments this evening? All right, seeing none, thank you, CAC, for your presentation this evening. Moving on to item C, this is the department update, and this will be presented by our Development Services Director, Mr. David Kuhl.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, did you get the monthly chart that we put out? Is that in your staff report? Okay, thank you. We do that for your knowledge of the most current place we are in our current planning development. So you can scroll through there and look at the various projects. They're labeled, and then you can go through them and see where they're located, what the issues are, and what the current status is in the right-hand column. We've talked about this before, but I wanted to continue to share this with you so that you're up to date on exactly what's going on. When people ask you out there in the community, they ask you what's going on up on Heller Street, then at least you can find out that it's something different than what's going on over on Oak Harbor Road. So different things are going on in town. As you can see, a lot of projects are starting to happen. As you know, Glint Car Wash is going up in the air now. And next to that will be Sonic Drive-In, and a coffee shop will be next to that. You can see a lot of walls are going up on the Hillside project, and they're building retaining walls that'll be designed to hold the infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, as well as the dirt. There's also some foundation walls going in at the same time. So they've elected to go ahead and build a lot of the concrete work first before they start building wood on top of that. As you might remember, that's 192 lots up there, and the first phase is about half of that. Other than that, we've made a couple of human resources things internally. The building official is moving on. She's going to retire. So Ginger Pennington's last day will be Friday. And we've already replaced her with our building plans examiner, Brian Colbert. So he's taking over. He's certified as a building official. And we have another plans examiner, building inspector joining us Thursday. And his name is Frank Spahn, who comes to us from Anacortes. So very experienced guy. He's also a certified building official. So two very well qualified people we have. A lot of volume coming up right now. They're reviewing a lot of apartment buildings here in town. And we anticipate if those start to generate permits soon, we'll be needing a lot of help. So one of the things we do is we augment a lot of our work with a company called BHC, which is a firm that does engineering and plan review for us, but they also do building inspection. And that firm is, we've been using them a lot recently to cover gaps in our staffing, and so they'll be available for us if things start to pick up. Those are the current planning projects I have listed, but I'm available for any questions you might have regarding long-range planning or current planning. And appreciate you all showing up.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners this evening? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cool, for your presentation this evening. This will conclude our discussion, action presentation portion. We will move on to member comments. Are there any commissioners that would like to make any comments? Yes, Commissioner Engelbert.
So Coopville found a planning director, and that planning director is me. So the issues of town council for Coopville and this planning commission will remain, but I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm here. So that's why I asked CAC if during the day we'll have meetings, because I will not be available. But otherwise, we're moving on, hoping to hire a new person to replace me so that we're back up to full staff.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations on the new role. Any other yes, Commissioner Fred.
And let me know if this is not the forum, but I had a question brought to me about why is it that Whidbey or Oak Harbor is having to build so many houses? And how come Coopville, are they part of that same process? Are they taking their fair share? Because we're running out of real estate up here, and that question was asked to me, so I figured I'd ask you.
So, Mr. Cool, I'll let you answer that. You're probably better equipped than I am, but it does have to do with our development plan here on the island.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Fry, your question was regarding building permits, and is your microphone on?
His question was about why Oak Harbor is getting to have to build as many houses, whereas Coopville and other municipalities are not being required to build this at the same rate.
Thank you for the question. A brief answer would be Oak Harbor is where the jobs are. And so in a meeting between the county and the city and the other cities, Coopville included, we all agreed that the most growth should go where the current jobs are and the current infrastructure, where there's a sewer plant and all the other things you need to accommodate people. Interestingly enough, I think Coopville was required to take 200 or 300 new houses, something like that, which is probably more than they can handle. And Langley also had to take a certain number of houses, and that's more than they can handle. But we said we can take, I think 5,500, something like that was what we all agreed to here in the city. And so we think we can accommodate that growth both through the central development area, where we're going to add some more density, and then maybe expanding our growth boundary a little bit towards the perimeter of the city.
Director Cool, thank you. I appreciate that, because I think that anybody who's listening in can actually understand that, and that word will start to spread more as well, and maybe tame down some of the questions about that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Commissioner Chazar.
Just along the same subject line, I just want to clear up some misperception the public has. It's not that we're being required to build 5,000 more homes, or that Coopville is being required 300 and Langley 300 or whatever, or the county another 4,000, whatever the numbers are. What the comprehensive plan for the 20-year plan for housing is that the cities and the county have to be prepared to grow that much. It's not that we're going to be required, so no one's going to come to us in 20 years and say, you only built 4,000 homes, so we're going to levy a penalty. No, our cities are required to be prepared for that type of growth in the future. And so it's up to the city administration to be prepared for that type of growth and working with the county. And as Mr. Cool pointed out, that some of that growth is going to have to move to the UGA, which will require us to annex part of that land if that happens during that time period. But it's more so that we should be more accommodating to developers to develop those kinds of, and have policies and ordinances in place to be more accommodating to the growth versus a requirement to build 5,000 homes. I've been approached, countless times, I can't even count on 2 hands, how many times I've been told, why is the city being required to build 5,000 homes? We're not being required to build 5,000 homes. We're being required to have policy and procedures in place to accommodate that type of growth over the next 20 years. So just wanted to clarify that, and correct me if I'm wrong if I misstated that statement.
No, that was well spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Okay. I have a couple comments, and they're likely not going to follow what we might think would come from a planning commission. But I want to start by saying I recognize what a privilege it is to be up here, to be in this position as a commissioner, having the former mayor put his trust in me and appoint me to this position, as well as having my fellow commissioners here put their trust in me and make me the chair. I went back and forth on this, whether this was a situation to discuss as a planning commissioner or as a private citizen. And I recognize that this is something that needs to be said as a commissioner. So while I'm speaking as a planning commissioner, I'm not speaking for this commission. It's no secret that right now there is discussion in place about removing the requirement on selling parks from taking it to an election. And while intentions are good, I think we've all heard the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And I want to make sure that we don't do that. We don't go down that path. And I think we have a responsibility to speak to these things, even if they don't fall under our purview just yet. When they do come, when land comes before us, whether it's to do a height amendment or land use change or code revision, that's going to come before this commission. Whether or not to strip the community of a vote isn't going to come before this commission, but we have a responsibility to address these kind of things. The hallmark of democracy, the cornerstones of what we believe in our American ideals, what I signed up for in the military, what some of my commissioners signed up for, what many in our community and many in our city have signed up for, was to defend those ideals. I cannot comfortably serve as a planning commissioner without making it known, and this is not about a 102-unit extend stay hotel on Pioneer. This is about suppressing the voice of the people. And the reason I chose to speak on this today is because I've heard at least 3 separate occasions in this very room made publicly comments that call into question our community's ability to exercise self-governance. We must be very careful that we do not fall into the fallacy that our experience and that our expertise better qualify us to govern the citizenry of our community. Self-governance is the ideal upon which all American ideals are built upon, and we must protect it. I am deeply concerned that this is even coming before our community to remove the requirement for a vote. $35,000 in the grand scheme of other things is not an expensive cost to honor the voice of the people and enact the will of the people. We are here, even as appointed commissioners, we are here with the distinct privilege of representing our community. And that's something I don't want anyone to forget from the mayor on down. We're here to enact the will of the people. And it's my sincere hope that what I'm saying tonight will resonate. There is zero reason to take away the voice of this community. And there is zero reason for anyone to ever believe that any of us elected, appointed, or hired are better qualified to speak to the will of the people than the people are themselves. Again, I'm speaking for myself today. This is something that I went back and forth on. I felt this is something that needed to be said from the position of somebody that represents our community, not as a private citizen. My fellow commissioners, you know, can say what they feel as well. And I want to hear that from them. But please, I hope everybody hearing this will reevaluate the decision that's before our city council, before our mayor, and before any decision is made, ask, what good comes from the silencing of our community? Thank you. Commissioner Cesar.
Well, just like the Supreme Court, one person gets one point of view and then another person on the Supreme Court gets another point of view. And I say this with all due respect, Chairman Plumlee. If in 1997 there was an actual public vote to create an ordinance for parks to be sold only by public vote, I believe that ordinance was created by 7 members of a city council with the approval back then. And so I would absolutely agree with you. If that was an actual public vote to create that ordinance, that 7 members of a city cannot reverse that. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about an ordinance that was created by 7 people in 1997, and we have 7 people now that are looking to adjust that vote to just a city council meeting where they take public input and that's it. I get that, and I understand that, but you got to draw a line of where we as people have to put everything out to vote. And can we imagine if our budgets were put to vote every single time and every single decision of city council? So we do have a voice in the city council. So if our current council does something that we do not like, we do have a voice. We can vote them out in the next election. We have that right. But I don't want to be voting on every single ancillary thing that has to do with the running of this city, and I think that cripples the city. And I think I agree. There's a passion right now for this ordinance, and I get there's oftentimes a hidden agenda. And I wasn't here in 1997. There could have been a hidden agenda to try to block a developer back then to make public parks a part of a public vote. So I don't know. And I respect everybody's opinion on that, but as a citizen and also as a commissioner, I don't want to be tied down to the crippling effect of having a public vote for every single public policy. And I'm going down a path here of a slippery slope, but I have a tendency to disagree because this was 7 people that decided on this in 1997. And as a citizen of this community, I'll give you another example. If someone came to us and wanted to purchase Flintstone Park and put a restaurant on Flintstone Park, me personally, I'd be okay with that. And I've expressed my concerns to the city council, a couple of them, that if someone does purchase a park, they should be required to put another piece of land in the trust that's a comparable piece of park land and develop it to the specifications that our city council requires them to do that. And yeah, I get the whole hidden agenda thing that happens often in our government, that all of a sudden the developer or somebody wants to do something and needs a ordinance tweaked just for that one particular thing, and it may have a benefit down the road for more than just one. And I don't like that either. I don't like that. And it's a small community, so we all knew what the parks tweaking of the ordinance was going to be for. But I do believe that has also benefits down the road. But I don't want to see a lot of parks go away just for city development. I don't want to lose the characteristic that we're known for in this town. But a public vote, I mean, we're seeing this right now with the sculpture. I mean, come on, it's come up again. Public vote, I mean, it's a matter of opinion, and we're going to get tied down. Can you imagine we went to public vote for the sculpture, and then we went to public vote for, okay, this piece of land on the corner of Pioneer we just talked about. If we went to public vote, it would be a crippling effect for this city. And but I get that, and I 100% agree with you. If that 1997 ordinance was created by public vote, it should require a public vote to change it. But it was created by 7 people, and we have 7 people that we've elected. And if we don't like it and we don't like what they did, let's go ahead and vote somebody else in the office that will more better reflect the views of the people of the city. I can't tell you whether they do or not right now. I personally do. I do believe they do, but we have that as a public vote to vote those people into that, and that's our right. But, and that's my rebuttal to what, but I do absolutely 100% respect everything you said. No ifs and buts about it.
Thank you, Commissioner Chazar. Any other comments before we? All right, seeing no comments, I will entertain a motion to, or excuse me, before I do that, our next scheduled meeting is on June 25th, 2024. If there are no other comments this evening, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Have a good evening.